Imagine a mother helplessly watching a grizzly drag her child into the river, or a climber facing his last moments alone on a remote peak in Alaska. These stories reveal the fierce, unpredictable side of nature, where courage, tragedy, and sacrifice collide. From an artist's fatal encounter in the Appalachians to a researcher's ultimate sacrifice in the Pyrenees, each tale sheds light on the thin line between human exploration and wildlife danger. Join us as we uncover 6 haunting stories of lives forever changed by encounters with the wild. On November 5, 2024, in the remote village of Ust-Kamchatsk in Russia's Far East, Svetlana Petrovna prepared to take her young son, Mikhail, for a short afternoon walk. Surrounded by thick forests and a winding river, Ust-Kamchatsk was a place where nature thrived, untouched by city life. The locals, accustomed to living in close proximity to the wilderness, held a quiet respect for the surrounding wildlife. Svetlana, a loving mother and active member of the small community, always took caution in such environments, mindful of the unpredictability that could emerge from the forest. Svetlana was in her early 30s, a strong and resilient woman raised in this rugged area. Life in Ust-Kamchatsk was tough, but the quiet beauty of the landscape with its dense woods and icy river made it feel like home. People in the village often warned each other of the wildlife, especially in the autumn months when bears would come closer to the village, drawn by the smell of food as they prepared for hibernation. Svetlana knew these tales well, but trusted her familiarity with the area to keep her family safe. With Mikhail bundled up in a thick coat and woolen hat, the two set off on a narrow trail that led down to the river. It was a spot where they often went, a place where Mikhail could play near the water's edge, collecting smooth stones and watching fish glide through the clear waters. Svetlana kept a careful eye on him as he laughed, his little hands splashing in the shallow pools. The peaceful setting brought her a sense of calm as she watched him play, feeling connected to both her son and the surrounding landscape. Unbeknownst to them, a grizzly bear had been moving along the riverbanks, drawn by the scent of fish that filled the crisp air. The bear, a massive creature with thick fur and powerful limbs, was foraging, driven by an instinctual need to stock up before the harsh winter arrived. Normally, such bears avoided human settlements, but hunger and diminishing food sources in the wild often forced them closer to populated areas. The natural rhythm of the wilderness was shifting, bringing dangers even the most experienced villagers could not always predict. As Mikhail giggled, reaching for a particularly round stone, Svetlana noticed a strange rustling sound coming from the trees. She turned to look, her heart beating a little faster as she tried to locate the source. Just then, the large, dark shape of the bear appeared through the trees, its powerful body moving steadily toward the water's edge. Svetlana's pulse quickened as the bear paused, lifting its head and sniffing the air, its gaze shifting in their direction. Instinctively, Svetlana stepped forward, her eyes locked on the bear, her mind racing as she calculated the best way to protect Mikhail. Her first thought was to gather him up and retreat quietly, hoping to avoid drawing the bear's attention. However, before she could act, the bear took a sudden step forward, its focus fixating on Mikhail. In a swift, terrifying motion, the bear charged toward them, splashing through the shallow water. Svetlana reached for her son, but the bear moved faster than she could anticipate. In an instant, the animal's powerful claws grabbed hold of Mikhail, pulling him toward the water with an unforgiving strength. Svetlana felt a surge of desperation as she watched the grizzly bear pull Mikhail toward the water. Her motherly instincts kicked in with a strength she didn't know she possessed, and she rushed forward, her mind blank but for one thought: saving her child. She stumbled into the icy river, her hands reaching for Mikhail, hoping to catch hold of him. The water's chill shocked her senses, but she pushed through, fighting to keep her balance on the slippery river rocks as she struggled to close the gap between them. The bear, still focused on Mikhail, barely noticed her at first. It was busy, trying to maintain its grip on the child, who squirmed and wriggled, his small arms flailing. Svetlana pushed herself harder, her heart pounding as she reached out, trying to snatch her son from the bear's powerful hold. She grasped his coat, her fingers tightening, refusing to let go. Her mind screamed for her to stay strong, that she had to keep fighting no matter the odds. But the bear, aware of her presence now, growled and pulled back, yanking Mikhail from her grasp. The powerful animal's instincts to protect its food source overpowered any hesitation it might have had. It backed further into the deeper waters, dragging Mikhail along. Svetlana, realizing she was losing him, felt a mix of terror and helplessness. She knew she could not outmatch the bear's strength, but her heart refused to accept the truth of what was happening before her. Unable to get closer, she called out, her voice cracking as she pleaded, hoping somehow to reach her son. But her words faded into the vastness of the wilderness, their desperate echoes swallowed by the sounds of the rushing river. The water splashed violently as the bear continued to pull Mikhail away. His small body soon slipped beneath the surface, hidden from view as the river's cold depths took hold. Svetlana's hands fell to her sides, numb and trembling as she stood there in the water, defeated and broken. She could feel the weight of the silence settle around her as the bear, its interest waning, slowly turned and lumbered away, disappearing back into the forest. The river continued to flow, as indifferent as the wilderness around her, and the chilling realization set in that she was alone with no way to bring Mikhail back. Stumbling back to the shore, Svetlana sank onto the rocks, her legs unable to carry her any longer. She sat there, staring blankly at the river, the horror of what had just happened seeping into her mind with a weight that felt unbearable. She could barely comprehend the scene she had just lived through, each second replaying in her mind with painful clarity. In the days that followed, the news of the tragedy spread quickly through the village and beyond. The villagers mourned alongside her, their sorrow reflecting the deep wound left in the heart of their tight-knit community. The incident sparked conversations about the growing dangers of living close to the wild, especially as wildlife began venturing into human spaces in search of food. Authorities responded by setting up new safety guidelines for families and issuing alerts to raise awareness about the risks of venturing too close to the forest's edge. Svetlana's loss became a lasting reminder of the fragile line that separated their lives from the wilderness, a harsh lesson that brought forth a new level of caution and respect. The villagers, moved by the tragedy, pledged to honor Mikhail's memory by staying vigilant, hoping to prevent another heartbreaking encounter with the powerful, unpredictable forces of nature. On October 15, 2024, David Parker, an experienced mountaineer known for his passion for the most remote and challenging climbs, embarked on a solo expedition in the rugged wilderness of Alaska. David had spent years training, building a strong reputation within the mountaineering community for his endurance and skill. He had climbed peaks all around the world, often choosing isolated, untouched routes. This time, he set his sights on a remote peak in Alaska, one that few had attempted due to its difficult terrain and harsh weather. The challenge thrilled him, and he planned meticulously, packing everything he thought he might need. Despite his skill, David dismissed recent warnings about heightened bear activity in the area. Rangers had issued advisories, but he was confident in his ability to handle the wild environment. He had dealt with wildlife before and believed his experience would keep him safe. His focus was set entirely on reaching the peak and documenting his journey along the way, eager to capture the beauty of the untouched landscape. He carried only the essentials, a small tent, limited provisions, and his climbing gear, all carefully chosen for lightness and practicality. After days of trekking through dense forests, rocky trails, and frozen rivers, David finally reached the base of the mountain. He planned to rest there briefly before beginning the climb. He found a spot to set up camp near a glacier where he could fill his water supply and enjoy the breathtaking views of the surrounding landscape. As night fell, he prepared a small meal, savoring the peace of being alone in nature. The stars shone brightly above him, and the silence around was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of the glacier nearby. As dawn approached, a cold, early morning mist settled over the campsite. David, half asleep, became vaguely aware of a soft rustling sound outside his tent. Initially, he dismissed it, assuming it to be the wind or perhaps a small animal, but the noise grew louder, too heavy for any ordinary forest creature. Curiosity mingled with caution, and he slowly unzipped his tent, peeking outside to investigate. The sight that met him was startling, a massive grizzly bear, its nose lifted to the air, sniffing intently. Drawn by the scent of his food, the bear had ventured close, its eyes scanning the campsite. David's heart pounded as he realized the gravity of the situation. He had not anticipated a bear encounter. especially not one this close. Quickly assessing his limited options, he remembered the advice from fellow mountaineers to appear large and make noise to scare bears away. Gathering his courage, he emerged from his tent, trying to keep his movements slow and steady. He raised his arms, attempting to appear bigger, and clapped loudly, hoping to startle the bear. But the bear, instead of retreating, paused only briefly before taking a cautious step closer, clearly undeterred by his efforts. David could feel his breath quicken as the bear's gaze fixed on him, its powerful frame looming larger with each step. The realization dawned on him that his food supplies, carelessly left within reach, had drawn the bear in and perhaps encouraged it. Steeling himself, he reached for a nearby trekking pole, holding it up as he continued to clap, his voice rising to a loud shout in a desperate attempt to drive the animal away. But the bear remained unmoved, watching him with a mixture of caution and curiosity. David's heart raced as he braced himself, knowing he might be facing a critical moment with few defenses at his disposal. He hoped that the bear would turn away, giving him a chance to retreat. But the silence around them thickened, each second dragging with unbearable tension as dawn light began to seep over the glacier's edge. David's heart thudded as he stood motionless, hoping the grizzly might lose interest. But the bear's eyes remained fixed on him, driven by hunger and curiosity. The creature was massive, its thick fur bristling in the early morning light, and its sheer size made the already remote landscape feel smaller and more dangerous. David's mind raced, considering every survival tip he'd learned. His food was nearby, but there was no easy way to retrieve it without drawing closer to the bear. His only option was to maintain eye contact and move slowly. With steady breaths, he began to back away, hoping to reach a safer distance. But the bear's head turned to follow his every step, and soon it took a few steps forward, edging closer to his supplies. David's pulse quickened. He knew he couldn't let it come into his camp without attempting to protect himself. After another tense moment, he reached into his pocket for a whistle, a last resort tool he always kept. He blew hard, the sharp sound echoing through the mountain air. For a moment, it worked. The bear froze, ears flicking back, clearly unsettled by the noise. But rather than retreat, it became more agitated, clawing the ground and letting out a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the cold morning air. David's throat went dry as the bear's gaze narrowed, the animal seeming more territorial than ever. His options were rapidly dwindling, and he couldn't afford to make a single misstep. Realizing that sound alone wasn't enough, he instinctively reached for his trekking pole, lifting it as a possible deterrent. But as he took a step back, he felt the slight slope of the terrain shift under his feet. Losing his balance, he stumbled, the pole slipping from his grip and clattering against a rock. The bear reacted instantly, drawn closer by his sudden movement. David scrambled to his feet, the fear now gripping him entirely as the bear took another step, its massive paws padding heavily against the rocky ground. In a flash of desperation, David's hand moved to his waist, where his bear spray was clipped. He had initially overlooked it in the tense moments, but now it was his last hope. He pulled the canister free, his fingers trembling slightly. Aiming it toward the bear, he pressed the nozzle, releasing a powerful spray that filled the air with a strong, stinging scent. The bear jerked back, shaking its head as the spray irritated its sensitive nose and eyes. The bear, now visibly agitated, let out a guttural roar, pawing the ground in anger. For a terrifying moment, David feared the bear would charge again, its patience worn thin by the harsh mist. But after another shake of its head, the bear turned and began to back away, its powerful form retreating toward the trees. David's heart didn't slow until the bear was fully out of sight, disappearing back into the dense undergrowth. As the quiet returned, David took a shaky breath, feeling the weight of what had just happened to settle over him. His gear lay scattered, some of it torn and scattered from his attempt to fend off the bear. Realizing the danger he'd narrowly escaped, he quickly gathered his belongings, taking care to secure his food and supplies. The isolation of his location now felt daunting, and the distant mountains were less inviting than before. David knew he needed to abandon the rest of his climb. The encounter had left him shaken, and his sense of confidence in the wilderness felt deeply altered. With one last look at the campsite and the direction the bear had gone, he began his descent. As he moved down the mountain, he couldn't shake the feeling that his experience was a stark reminder of the risks that even seasoned adventurers faced in the wild. He made his way back with a new respect for the power of nature and the unpredictable forces that lay hidden in its depths. On October 22, 2024, Lily Carson, a devoted landscape painter with a deep love for nature, set out for the Appalachian Mountains. Her passion for capturing the vibrant autumn colors was fueled by the beauty she had seen in photographs of the area. She longed to immerse herself in the deep reds, warm oranges, and golden yellows of the season, bringing them to life on her canvas. Lily was meticulous in her craft, always seeking out unique angles and remote spots to capture a scene that felt truly her own. Her friends and family knew her as someone who thrived in solitude, finding peace and inspiration in the quiet corners of the world. Armed with her paints, canvas, and a small backpack with essentials, she began her journey early in the morning, following a well-worn path that led to popular viewpoints. However, as she hiked along, she felt a pull to find a more secluded area, one that would offer her the untouched landscapes she cherished. Lily believed that venturing off the marked trails would grant her access to the untouched beauty of the mountains, allowing her to find that perfect spot she envisioned. Despite knowing the risks of stepping off established paths, she reassured herself that her experience and careful steps would keep her safe. After walking for nearly an hour, Lily stumbled upon a high clearing nestled between dense clusters of towering trees. The view before her took her breath away. The slopes were covered in autumn leaves, their rich colors illuminated by the gentle sunlight filtering through the clouds. Eagerly, she set up her canvas and began painting, carefully blending colors to capture the grandeur of the mountains as they spread out before her. She became lost in the rhythm of her brushstrokes, each one a testament to her love for this fleeting beauty. As the morning wore on, a light breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of the forest. Deeply focused on her work, Lily was unaware of the soft rustling in the underbrush nearby. She didn't notice the movement or the faint sounds of a black bear foraging for food. The bear, searching for berries and other nourishment before winter's arrival, had wandered closer than Lily realized. Preoccupied with her art, she remained oblivious to the presence of the bear, her mind solely occupied with the colors and shapes on her canvas. Suddenly, a snap of a twig broke the stillness, jolting her out of her concentration. She turned just in time to see the large, dark form of the black bear only a short distance away. Its gaze was fixed on her, its body tense and muscles coiled. In a panic, Lily froze, the realization of her vulnerable position sinking in. The bear, perceiving her sudden movement as a threat, took a cautious step forward, its head lowered and its eyes watchful. Heart pounding, Lily attempted to back away, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. Her supplies and canvas lay forgotten on the ground as she slowly edged backward, hoping to create enough distance between herself and the bear. But her retreat seemed to trigger the bear's defensive instincts further. In a split second, the bear lunged forward, and Lily's instincts took over as she turned and began to run. The bear moved swiftly, and Lily's heart raced as she sprinted through the uneven terrain, her breaths coming in quick, shallow gasps. The weight of her bag slowed her down, but she dared not stop to drop it. She pushed herself, her focus shifting to survival as she navigated the rocky, leaf-strewn forest floor. Each step was a struggle to keep balance as the bear closed the distance between them, its powerful strides propelling it forward. The once peaceful clearing, filled with colors and quiet, had turned into a scene of fear and urgency, a reminder of nature's unpredictability and the thin line between beauty and danger. Lily's pulse thudded in her ears as she ran through the dense forest, each step a desperate effort to put distance between herself and the bear. The uneven ground made her stumble, but she pushed forward, knowing that stopping could mean disaster. Her breaths were quick and shallow, the weight of her bag digging into her shoulders. Every instinct screamed at her to keep moving, but the bear's steady, heavy footsteps felt too close, as if they were right behind her. With a last frantic glance back, Lily saw the bear closing in, its powerful frame moving through the undergrowth with ease. She changed direction, veering off toward a slope where the ground dipped sharply. The change in elevation slowed the bear momentarily, giving her a few precious seconds. She scrambled down, gripping onto tree roots and rocks, her heart racing as she fought to stay balanced. Reaching the base of the slope, Lily ducked behind a thick cluster of trees, hoping the dense foliage would hide her. She held her breath, listening intently as the bear's heavy steps grew fainter. She allowed herself a moment to gather her strength. her body shaking from the adrenaline that pulsed through her veins. But even in the silence, a deep, uneasy feeling settled in her mind, reminding her of how close she had come to disaster. As the forest quieted, Lily rose cautiously, making her way back in the direction she thought led to the main trail. Her legs felt weak, each step heavy as she navigated the unfamiliar forest. The beautiful scenery that had once captivated her now felt hostile, every shadow and sound a reminder of how vulnerable she was. She regretted wandering off the marked paths, understanding now the risks of solitude in the wild. Hours passed as she retraced her steps, the weight of her experience settling heavily on her. Eventually, she emerged back onto the familiar trail, the sight of it bringing an overwhelming sense of relief. She paused, looking back at the forest she had just escaped, filled with a mixture of respect and fear for the wilderness that had once felt so inviting. Lily knew she would never forget this day and the lesson it had taught her. News of Lily's tragic encounter spread quickly. Her family and friends mourned the loss of someone who had loved nature so deeply. Local authorities, moved by the incident, emphasized the need for hikers to respect marked trails, especially in areas known for wildlife activity. Lily's story became a cautionary tale, reminding others of the importance of following safety guidelines in nature. In the aftermath, the park administration introduced new safety measures, placing signs along trails that warned visitors of potential dangers. Rangers offered workshops to educate people on how to avoid wildlife encounters and stay safe. These changes became a tribute to Lily's passion and a step toward protecting others who shared her love for the outdoors. Lily's legacy endured as a reminder of the fragile balance between humans and wildlife. Her memory inspired fellow nature lovers to approach the wilderness with greater caution, respecting the habitats of the creatures who lived there long before humans arrived. On a quiet evening in early October 2024, Tom, a dedicated fisherman, set out toward a secluded lake nestled deep in the forests of Maine. Tom had always felt at peace when surrounded by the stillness of nature, casting his line in tranquil waters as he listened to the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore. For him, fishing was more than just a hobby. It was an escape, a way to immerse himself in the beauty of the wilderness. As an avid outdoorsman, he took every opportunity to leave behind the noise of daily life and find solace in the solitude of untouched landscapes. Tom had often heard stories of the secluded lake's rich waters, known for teeming with large trout. The tales were enough to lure him to this remote spot, a place he'd never fished before but had dreamed of visiting for years. Arriving just before sunset, he unloaded his gear from his truck, feeling a rush of excitement at the prospect of an uninterrupted weekend in nature. Though there had been recent reports of black bears in the area, Tom, confident in his experience with the outdoors, felt well prepared and didn't think much of the warnings. After all, black bears were not uncommon in Maine, and he was certain he could handle any situation that might arise. As the sky deepened into dusk, Tom set up his small camp by the water's edge, carefully arranging his tent and gathering wood for a fire. He chose a spot close to the lake so he could wake up to the gentle sounds of the water and start fishing at first light. The scent of pine filled the crisp autumn air, mingling with the cool scent of the lake, creating the perfect setting for a peaceful night. With his campsite ready, Tom began fishing from the shore. The lake's reputation proved true, as within minutes, he felt the tug of a trout on his line. He reeled in his catch, a sizable fish that would make for a delicious meal. As he prepared it over his open fire, the savory aroma filled the air, wafting into the surrounding trees. Tom sat back, enjoying the warmth of the flames and the satisfaction of his catch. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows as he settled in to eat. Unbeknownst to Tom, the scent of the freshly cooked fish drifted further into the forest than he intended. As night fully settled, a pair of eyes watched from the shadows, drawn by the irresistible aroma. A black bear, driven by hunger, had been roaming nearby, and the smell of food brought it closer to Tom's camp. The bear moved quietly, cautious yet determined, drawn by the scent of the meal. Tom remained unaware of its presence as he continued eating, oblivious to the danger approaching his campsite. When he finally spotted movement near the edge of the trees, his heart raced. He could make out the dark shape moving toward him, its powerful frame illuminated by the glow of the fire. His initial surprise quickly turned to concern as he realized the bear was advancing, focused on the food. Not wanting to lose his meal, Tom tried to make himself appear intimidating, waving his arms and making noise in an attempt to scare it off. He knew bears were often more afraid of humans than humans were of them, and he hoped his display would be enough to make it retreat. However, the bear, emboldened by hunger and the smell of the food, did not back down. As the bear continued to advance, Tom's confidence began to waver. His initial attempts to scare it away had failed, and the animal seemed determined to get closer to the food. Every instinct told him to retreat, but the thought of abandoning his campsite and gear made him hesitate. Taking a deep breath, he tried to stand his ground, hoping his presence would deter the bear. But the bear, now inches from the remnants of his dinner, showed no signs of fear. Realizing he had no choice, Tom stepped back slowly. But the bear suddenly became defensive, its posture shifting as it let out a low growl. Tom's heart pounded, his mind racing to find a solution. He remembered his bear spray and quickly reached for it, hoping it might provide a safe escape. However, in his haste, he fumbled, and before he could effectively use it, the bear launched forward, swiping its massive paw in his direction. The force of the attack sent him sprawling, the impact leaving him dazed and vulnerable on the ground. Scrambling to his feet, Tom tried to move back, but the bear's persistence was relentless. Its instinct to protect its food source drove it to continue advancing, pushing him further from the campsite. Each step back took Tom closer to the dense forest, away from any potential help. He felt the cold grip of fear tighten, his mind consumed with thoughts of survival. His vision blurred as he tried to keep his balance, his body aching from the bear's forceful strike. As the minutes dragged on, the bear finally turned its attention fully to the campsite, distracted by the scent that had initially drawn it in. This momentary pause allowed Tom to retreat further, creating distance between himself and the powerful animal. His hands shook, his breathing rapid as he backed away, never turning his gaze from the bear. Reaching a safe distance, Tom's shock began to settle into a mix of relief and lingering fear. He was alive, but the encounter had shaken him deeply. The bear's relentless approach and disregard for his presence underscored the unpredictable power of nature and its inhabitants. As he gathered his thoughts, he felt a newfound respect and caution, knowing that even the smallest misstep in the wild could lead to disaster. The story of Tom's encounter soon spread through the local community, serving as a reminder of the need for respect and care in bear territories. New signs were placed around the lake, advising campers to store food securely and remain vigilant. On October 15, 2024, Takashi Ito, an experienced hiker with years of exploring Japan's rugged landscapes, set out on a solo journey deep into the forests of Hokkaido. Known for his dedication to hiking and his deep love for the natural world, Takashi had always respected the boundaries and beauty of Japan's untouched wilderness. Despite recent news of bear sightings in the area, he felt prepared, carrying essential survival tools and his trusted bear spray. Takashi believed his experience and knowledge would keep him safe, and he was excited to explore the remote trails of the island. Hokkaido's forests were dense, filled with towering trees and thick underbrush that made it challenging for any sunlight to reach the ground. As he hiked, Takashi admired the quiet beauty of the forest, a world away from the bustling city life. The earthy scent of damp leaves and the distant sounds of birds filled the air, creating a tranquil setting that made him feel at home. Takashi had always appreciated the peaceful solitude that nature offered, and this hike was no different. He took note of his surroundings, aware of the potential risks but feeling secure with the precautions he had taken. However, as Takashi ventured further along the narrow trail, the silence around him began to deepen, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves. He knew the forests of Hokkaido were home to the Usuri brown bear, a large and powerful animal known for its territorial behavior. Despite the recent warnings, he had not seen any signs of bears during his hikes in the past. Still, he kept his bear spray close and walked carefully, understanding that sudden encounters could be dangerous. Around midday, while crossing a small clearing, Takashi's attention was drawn to movement a short distance away. His eyes locked onto a large figure partially hidden by the foliage, an Usuri brown bear engrossed in foraging. Takashi froze, his heart racing as he observed the bear, realizing how close he was. He had unknowingly entered the bear's feeding area, a mistake that hikers were often warned to avoid. The bear, sensing his presence, lifted its head, its eyes locking onto him. Takashi felt the surge of tension in the air as the bear's demeanor shifted, its body tensing as it perceived him as an intruder. Takashi's instincts took over as he tried to back away slowly, hoping not to provoke the animal further. He gripped his bear spray tightly, ready to use it if necessary, but the bear's initial curiosity quickly turned to aggression, and it began to advance toward him, each step slow and deliberate. Takashi's heart pounded as he tried to remain calm, but the distance between them was closing quickly. Takashi's mind raced as the bear closed in. He held his ground, hoping the animal would lose interest, but the bear's determination was clear. In a final attempt to protect himself, he raised the bear spray, positioning it toward the advancing animal. As he released the spray, the gusty wind shifted slightly, carrying most of the substance away from the bear. The effect was minimal, barely causing the bear to hesitate. Takashi's heart sank as he realized his last line of defense had failed. He began to back away more quickly, careful not to make any sudden movements that might further provoke the bear. His training taught him not to turn and run, but the urge to flee was almost overwhelming. The bear, however, was determined to assert its territory. It lunged forward with a powerful force, and Takashi felt the ground shake beneath him as it moved. With nowhere to escape, he braced himself, trying to shield his vital areas as the bear's paw struck, sending a shockwave of pain through his body. He struggled to stay conscious, feeling the weight of the bear's presence overpowering him. As the minutes passed, the forest grew eerily quiet around them, with only the rustling of leaves and the bear's heavy breathing filling the silence. Takashi's mind drifted in and out of awareness, and the moments blurred together. Eventually, the bear released him, possibly satisfied that he no longer posed a threat. The large creature lumbered back toward the woods, leaving Takashi lying motionless on the forest floor. A search team, alerted by his absence when he missed a scheduled check-in, ventured into the forest days later, guided by the faint signs he had left along the trail. They found his campsite undisturbed, with his supplies still neatly packed, and followed the trail further until they reached the clearing. The tragic discovery of his belongings and final resting place sent waves of shock through the community, especially among the friends and family who knew him as a skilled, cautious outdoorsman. The news of Takashi's encounter spread quickly, sparking a national conversation in Japan about the unpredictable dangers of wildlife and the need for heightened awareness when exploring natural habitats. Many hikers and nature enthusiasts were deeply affected by the tragedy, and authorities responded with new guidelines and reminders for visitors to respect the boundaries of wild animals, especially in areas with known bear activity. The community remembered Takashi as a nature lover who had sought solace in the wilderness and who ultimately paid a heavy price for venturing too close to a world that was not his own. In the wake of the incident, there was an increased push for educational programs aimed at helping hikers understand the risks of bear encounters, and more signs were placed along trails advising caution and respect for wildlife. Though his passing left a void, Takashi's story served as a lasting reminder of nature's strength and the importance of vigilance, preserving his legacy as a dedicated adventurer who had inspired others to seek the beauty of the wilderness with humility and care. On November 10, 2024, deep within the Pyrenees Mountains, Dr. Alejandro Sanchez led his research team with a calm, determined demeanor. Alejandro was a seasoned wildlife biologist with years of experience studying bear populations in challenging environments. Known for his deep respect for nature and the animals he studied, he dedicated his life to understanding bear behavior, especially in remote regions like the Pyrenees. The mountain range, stretching between France and Spain, had always fascinated him, and he was passionate about protecting the bears that inhabited its rugged terrain. That particular day, the team was tracking a small family of grizzly bears, a female with 2 cubs. Alejandro had planned this field study meticulously, knowing the risks involved in monitoring these large predators. He briefed his team on safety protocols and made sure everyone understood the importance of maintaining a safe distance from the bears they observed. They moved carefully along the mountainside, scanning for tracks, droppings, and other signs of bear activity. Alejandro, with his wealth of experience, guided his team through each step, always keeping an eye on their surroundings. However, the Pyrenees were as unpredictable as they were beautiful. As the team advanced along a narrow path, the ground suddenly shook beneath their feet. Rocks loosened and slid, tumbling down the slope with a roar. The unexpected rock slide created a natural barrier, separating Alejandro from the rest of his team. Dust filled the air, and shouts echoed as each person tried to regain their footing on the uneven ground. Alejandro found himself stranded on one side of the debris, unable to see or hear his colleagues clearly. He knew he couldn't risk moving through the unstable rocks to reunite with them. It would be safer to wait until the dust settled. As he regained his bearings, Alejandro noticed movement nearby. Just a few meters away, an enormous male grizzly bear emerged from behind the trees. The bear's large frame and sharp gaze signaled that it was no stranger to defending its territory. Alejandro froze, instinctively aware that any sudden movements might provoke an aggressive response. The bear locked eyes with him, its muscles tensing as it sized up this human intruder. Alejandro's mind raced, knowing the danger this encounter posed, not only to himself, but also to his team, who were now vulnerable on the other side of the rock slide. With his team's safety in mind, Alejandro made a split-second decision. He knew he had to lead the bear away from the area before it sensed his colleagues nearby. He carefully shifted his position, moving slowly so as not to startle the bear, all the while maintaining eye contact. Each step he took was calculated, his movements deliberate. His only focus was to draw the bear's attention to himself and away from his team. The bear, growing more alert, turned fully toward Alejandro, watching his every move. As Alejandro continued to move carefully away from his team, he kept the bear's gaze locked on him. Every muscle in his body was tense, but he knew he had to stay calm. The bear, sensing an unfamiliar presence, grew increasingly agitated, following Alejandro's every step. He deliberately chose a path that led away from his team, guiding the bear further into the forested area, where he hoped his colleagues would be safer. Alejandro was acutely aware that any misstep could trigger the bear to attack, but he maintained his focus, determined to keep his colleagues out of harm's way. The bear advanced with cautious but powerful strides, its eyes locked on Alejandro. Each step the animal took seemed to echo through the silent forest, a reminder of its immense strength. Alejandro's heart pounded, but he kept his movement steady, each step measured. He knew that sudden gestures or signs of fear could provoke the bear, so he kept his pace slow, drawing the animal further into the wilderness. After a few minutes, Alejandro glanced over his shoulder to ensure his team was well out of sight. With a mix of relief and dread, he realized he had successfully led the bear far enough that his colleagues would be safe. Yet he remained vulnerable, facing the powerful creature alone. As he stepped back again, his foot caught on a loose rock and he stumbled, causing the bear to pause briefly, sensing an opportunity. In that critical moment, Alejandro kept his eyes focused on the bear, standing his ground to appear as calm and confident as possible. Eventually, the bear seemed to lose interest, deciding there was no immediate threat. It turned away, heading deeper into the woods, leaving Alejandro alone, yet profoundly aware of the fragility of life in such wild terrain. When his team finally found him later, they saw a man changed by the encounter, his face reflecting both relief and a deep respect for the wilderness he had dedicated his life to studying. The story of his bravery and sacrifice spread widely, inspiring discussions on the importance of safety for researchers who enter these unpredictable habitats where nature remains powerful and untamed.